Hi everybody, Steve here. Welcome back. It's been a little bit since I made a video. One of the things I have to consider when I make these things is how much information support can I give in each video, work full time, and do all these things. So I'm trying to figure out ways to make better videos, things that are interesting more, give you more information, and perhaps be more supportive. So this one, I've decided to take a look at another video that I did, where we kind of talked about trauma, PVCs and trauma. As somebody that's had PVC since his mid to late, I keep going back thinking about this. I think it's the early to mid 20s, actually. What life has been like having to live through these things. And as many of you know very well, when you have them constantly for years, it's just repetitive. And you ruminate on when they're going to hit again. You get that kind of where they kind of wane, they lessen, and then suddenly you'll get a burst of these things, and then you're back thinking I'm going to die. I think it was somebody in the comments that said that every time you get these things, it's like facing down a gun in your face, that somebody's going to kill you. I fully agree with that. It's like dying. It's like facing death. It's like that moment when it's over and you got to live through this. And if so you were faced with somebody pointing a gun at you, they pull the trigger, it's over. This doesn't end. It's the constant state of being in that moment. Now, as many of you know, I'm a counselor. I'm a therapist. And when I look at myself, I try to figure out my study of trauma and things like that. How does this play into this? No, I want to qualify everything and kind of say that I am not diagnosing anybody. I don't diagnose myself. Sometimes I do catch myself doing it, but I don't diagnose myself. The only way I can diagnose someone is if they sit down with me and work with me, right? So I'm not diagnosing you. I'm not diagnosing me. I'm giving us information to perhaps give ourselves a better understanding of what's going on, and those around us a better idea of what's going on. I'm going to use some clinical tools here that just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So with that, let's get into it here a bit. All right, so you can see the website I have up there from Very Well Mind. Essentially what it gives is an outline. It tells you exactly what the DSM-5 PTSD diagnostic criteria are. Now, this is the DSM-5. All right. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. We call it the DSM-5. Psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, whatever you want to call them, we use this to make diagnoses. This is a breakdown as it is in the DSM-5. This is exactly what it says in the DSM-5. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Right. I also take my knowledge from this book, the Psychodynamic Diagnostic Manual, 2nd edition. I think it elaborates more on the realities of trauma. The DSM-5, it kind of pigeonholes. It's very rigid. And as one of the authors said, you take it kind of with a grain of salt. So I take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, I want to kind of go through here. And I'm a counselor. I've said that. And I use these criteria when I work with different folks, to determine if they have PTSD or trauma. We're just going to talk about trauma, right? Because we who suffer from PVCs, as I mentioned before in previous videos, we have the initial trauma of this stuff. But it gathers, it builds over the years. Early 20s, I want to say 1992, 1993, I started having them. So I was in my early 20s, which I can never really figure out half the time. But anyway, so I remember those moments. So I want to kind of go through this and how, keep in mind, I'm not diagnosing you. Please remember that I'm not diagnosing myself. We're just kind of giving an idea what trauma looks like and how trauma unfolds and how it sticks. All right. Because, we go through life and, we're fine and then we're not fine because of PVCs. And that sits always in the back of our mind when that's going to happen. So let's kind of go through this and see how we're going to apply it to PVCs. We're going to apply it to SVT. We're going to apply it to PACs. really anything that you have heart related for us specifically, not anything else, just our population, our group of folks that's often overlooked. All right, so here we go. Now, these are breaking down in Criterion A, B, and C, D, E, F, and G, and H. Okay, we're going to start at the top. Criterion A, you're exposed to one or more events, all right? So, you could have trigeminy one time, and that's enough. But the key thing here, more events that involve death or threatened death. Now, threatened death could be, being a soldier, or it could have been in a severe car accident, or somebody holds a gun to your head, right? For us, the threatened death is the PVC, the PAX, the SVT, the NSVT. That's the threatened death. In our minds, we believe that death is going to happen. So that's our threatened death, okay, in our minds. Now, let's go down through the criteria here. Directly experiencing the event. Well, we directly experience it. It's an internal process. It's an internal attack, right, on our safety. The key word safety. We don't feel safe when these things are going on, and I doubt few of us actually get the same level of safety we had before we got them, or when they became severe, right? So as we go down that list, so directly experiencing the event, nailed it. The bottom one here, the last one here in A, is very important. Experiencing repeated exposure to distressing details of an event, such as a police officer repeatedly hearing details about child sexual abuse. Now, obviously, child sexual abuse is very traumatic, all right? So I'm not trying to parallel these things or say one's more than the other. For us, we're going to keep this in the context of our population. We experience details of this event constantly, because when we go to the cardiologist and, okay, tell me what's happening, they say, well, I felt this thump in my chest, or I felt thump and a beat, a thump, a beat, a thump, however you described it, right? So we're hearing the details again in our own mind, right? So we're experiencing that over and over and over again. And when we have to explain this to lay people or people that don't have it, family members, loved ones, so on, we continue to repeat these details. Now, I want to make a connection here. In the past, when I was a little younger, I would go out on the internet and look these things up. That's repeated exposure. Because nothing ever comforted me. It made it worse. When somebody would talk about, oh, I had a PVC and then this happened, PVC and this happened, I always thought, was that going to happen to me? Do I have that next? Then your mind races and makes connections. Oh, I have PVCs. Am I having a heart attack? I'm going to die. These things are freaking going to kill me, right? So we are exposed to it constantly. All the time we're exposed to this stuff. So let's move on to Criterion B. You experience at least one of the following intrusive symptoms associated with the traumatic event. Ours isn't one event. When we have the initial event and they return, because we talk about when they come back, I mentioned that we have the video on that. It's compounded. It's compound trauma, because as soon as we have that event again, right? It just is exacerbated. Sorry, I was struggling for the word. It's exacerbated. We have more trauma, right? It's involuntary. It's intrusive. Upsetting memories of the traumatic event. I don't know anybody that has severe PVCs that doesn't have that. When we think about this stuff, literally, we're rubber banded back to each moment that we have this. I can remember the first one, driving down the highway on my way to work. I had 2 or 3 of these things. Scared the shit out of me. The year that I spent on the couch completely immobilized, unable to do anything. So I continue to have those intrusive memories. And sometimes in the past I've ruminated, which means that's all I thought about. I don't have the dreams. Some of us don't. Dissociation, like having flashbacks. I don't necessarily have flashbacks where I'm brought back in that moment, like I'm completely rubber banded back, where it's happening again necessarily. I just have the same feeling each time of death. I'm going to die. Gun to the face, you're gone. Strong and persistent distress upon exposure to cues that are either inside or outside of your body that is connected to your traumatic event. Two things here. Our trauma is internal. It's our heart attacking us. That's how I look at it. My heart is actually attacking me. He's like, come at me, bro. And I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do, right? So it's inside. And there are cues that plays upon the mind. For instance, if you have GERD, like I had GERD, when I have severe chest pain with GERD, I used to, my mind, I'm gonna have a heart attack. I'm gonna die. And then you have the PVC in the middle of that. Is the PVC gonna kill me? You know, or you have what I call a long PVC, where you think it lasts forever, and it's really just, it's less than a second, right? So that's a cue. And that takes me back to all those moments, right? I'm rubber banded back, and it snaps back. The further we get away from those moments, the rubber band stretches and tightens. And eventually, we're going to get smacked in the head with this thing again, right? Now, the external cues, you know, my doctor tells me, my cardiologist, that heat can bring these things on. And in the past, I grew up in the Midwest, so, you know, you work hard, you get sweaty, do things outside. I used to love to do that stuff. But after these times of severe PVCs, I don't want to get warm. I don't want to sweat. I don't want to do any of this stuff because I think it's a trigger. It reminds me it's going to snap that rubber band back. So that's an external cue for me, right? It's an external trigger that these things could go off. Like when I work hard outside, like recently I had to tear a fence apart. Chain link fence, crowbar, wire cutters, digging this thing out of the ground. You know, in the back of my mind, PVC is going to kick off. SVT. You know, or I'm going to get to a rhythm that, you know, kicks me off. On the last one on that one, on B, strong bodily reactions. For example, increased heart rate upon exposure to the reminder of the traumatic event. Well, simply getting sucked back into those thoughts. You know, I'm thinking about it. Am I going to get a PVC? Then you get a PVC, right? So I don't necessarily get a racing heart rate with that stuff like that, but you get shortness of breath. Your body responds to it. It's a threat. It puts you into flight or fight. And that's where most of us live, is in that hypersensitive area where we're constantly looking for threats, the fear of this thing's kicking off again. So we lived in this perceived threatened state, right? Because we don't know when these things are going to stop or when they're going to start again. When you have those moments of happiness, the back of the mind, we're sitting there thinking, when's the next one going to kick off? How long is this going to last? So we start thinking quality of life, right? Well, when we go to the doctor says they're fine, they're not going to bother you, they're benign. Physiologically, perhaps they are not going to damage the heart, right? But because they see only the heart, they don't look at the rest of us. Now, in our body, we have the vagus nerve, right? The vagal system, which we have highways going up and down. Our feelings and our emotions start in our viscera and work their way up to the brain, right? So we feel here. So we're going to feel those heart palpitations. We're going to feel all that stuff before our brain gets a chance to kick in. So if we're always in this heightened state of awareness that something bad can happen or something's going to trigger these things, our body's going to respond to it. We're going to dump adrenaline. We're always going to walk around in that state of anxiety. When they're going to happen? Is this the next one? Is this the moment this happens? Is this the moment I die? Now we have these peaks where we get to see that, you know, we get back to normal for just a brief time, but always sitting in the back of our minds and on our shoulder is, when's the next thing going to happen? Where our body is aware of that. We're not calm. So we can have indigestion. We can have digestion problems. You name it. We can walk around with an above average heart rate, breathing issues. I know when I become very full of anxiety, worrying about this stuff, I can become short of breath. And I've had every test from a cardiologist you can imagine for years. So we have body reactions. And when I talk to other people that have PVCs and so on and so forth, I always ask them, where do you feel it? Now, we feel it in the chest. right? Do you feel it in your brain? Do you feel your face get warm? Do you feel your chest get heavy? Your arms and legs get heavy? Where do you feel it? Try to kind of identify a trigger. You know, what we can do to help mitigate the PVCs from coming on. Can we stop them? I don't know if we can or not, but you know, we're having discussions on the message board about things we're doing to help each other, and I think that's our ticket in. So when we look at me being low in vitamin D and B1, is vitamin D because I wasn't getting enough sunshine, or was I not getting enough of my food? Now, I was low vitamin D before I went vegetarian and then eventually vegan. So it has nothing to do with that because it was low before. But knowing that, using supplements, I've raised my rate back to where they should be. Well, is that a digestion problem? Are we in such a state of anxiety that we were creating issues with our digestive system, that we're not getting the nutrients out of our food, that we have to supplement and shotgun this stuff by dumping more in? I don't know, but it's something I think about. You know, talk to your doctor, your GI docs. Okay, moving on. C, frequent avoidance of reminders associated with a traumatic event, as demonstrated by one of the following. Avoidance of thoughts, feelings, or physical sensations that bring up memories of the traumatic event. Kind of outline this a little bit. Heat, running. At one point in my life, I was able to go out and run 3-4 miles at a pop. Just, you know, take off and run. I was even able to run a 10K, a 5K, 10K, and then, you know, run 7 miles, push myself. It's fun. One day I'm running, and my heart took off running 100 miles an hour. I had 2 PVCs first, and then it went to 100 miles an hour, and then went completely out of rhythm. I have no idea what the rhythm was. And as I'm passing out on the street, my wife had to run in and call 911. Thankfully, it converted. I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. I didn't have the ambulance come or anything. But, so now I don't want to run. That feeling's there. I've attached that moment to my trauma, right? And just like the second one, avoidance of people, places, conversations, activities, running, objects or situations that bring up memories of the traumatic event. It all comes in. You know, when you started them, you know what makes them worse. Sometimes we don't have a choice in what we do about that, because if it's work, what do we do? At PVCs, you're fine. But I can't work. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Get help. That's what you hear. This is a trauma for us, in my opinion. It's not that simple as saying somebody go to work or get help. We need help. We do. We need to develop a stronger community for this stuff to lobby. I hate to use that word, but lobby people into understanding what we're going through here. All right. So if you want to visit this and read more about this, you can go to Very Well Mind and look up PTSD. Now, this is specific to PTSD. I'm talking about general trauma right here, and how closely things that we go through relate to PTSD. Again, I can't diagnose you. I'm not diagnosing you. Don't use this information and go, well, this guy said, and he's a counselor, says that I have PTSD. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying, look at these things. They're serious for us in our population, and we need to lobby, and we need to get people to understand our situations. So you can kind of read through some like some of these things. Loss of interest in activities that you used to enjoy. You know? Just read through there. There's a lot of them that point to us. Feeling detached from others. Persistent inability to experience positive emotions. If you're in trigeminy, or you've had a run of PVCs, I don't think you're going to be smiling a lot. I don't think you're going to go out jumping for joy. We're mired in this mess. It's like tar. It's like being in a tar pit. You're hanging on the edge. You're almost in. You know. So our Criterion A here. Difficulty concentrating. And that's me. When I have these things, I can't concentrate. Feeling constantly on guard. I'm very hypervigilant about this. What's going on here? Heightened startle response in certain situations. Self-destructive behavior, not necessarily. Irritability, yeah. And problem sleeping, which I've gotten better at sleeping since I've started taking supplements and stuff like that. And you can kind of see, like, the above symptoms last for more than 1 month. I've had these for years. G, the symptoms bring about considerable distress and interfere greatly with a number of different areas of your life. Absolutely. They've impacted my job, my relationships, physical activity, recreation, happiness, all those things. I remember, I was working on a project, and I just was having them so bad that I couldn't be me. I was totally somebody else. So it was very unpleasant. So it definitely affects all the areas of our life. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you have PVCs whether you're a man or woman. What about your sex life? What about other people that get to go in and just, they don't have this thing to worry about? And they may have the other stuff relationships have, but that's physical activity. We worry about that, or at least I do. Okay, so you can kind of read through there and get an idea of what PTSD is. There's symptoms and risk factors and treatment and living with and so on and so forth. But when you look at that picture and you look at it from a traumatic point of view, like we have trauma, and I really believe that. I think that when doctors dismiss us, they're dismissing the fact that we have a condition, though benign to our medical health as related to the cardiovascular system. They're benign, but they're malignant to the rest of us, the rest of our bodies. Psychologically, these things take a dramatic toll on us. It's not just you're benign, go away, just get over it and ignore them. It doesn't work that way. No more can we ignore these than somebody can ignore a person with a gun in their face. That's correlate. I'm sorry. That's what it is like for us. Okay? So we struggle to cope. And each time we have episodes of PVC, it takes a little more out of us. It takes a little bit more off for our quality of life. Now, when you look at the big picture, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, it affects our viscera. That includes stomach, breathing, liver, kidneys, everything. If we're in a heightened state all the time, we have anxiety, we're in the flight or fight area, right, all the time, that's not healthy. So they are not benign. They are malignant systemically. There's a part of our body that's going to pay for it somewhere. It's usually our mind. And our state of health declines because of it. We're not healthy. Not mentally. It takes a lot of work. We have treatment programs for PTSD for all walks of life now. Military, sexual assault, kids with trauma. I work with kids in trauma. It starts very young. And when I look at these populations and I look at how we treat it, ours is the same, except for the trauma continues. And I'm not diminishing. I've worked with vets. It's horrific. When they come home, that initial trauma stays with them, but they're not in the battlefield anymore. They still relive that. For us, we live it every day. We still have it. It carries with us. The car accident's over. That does not diminish the trauma whatsoever. But our trauma is daily for some of us. It's compounded daily. When you're a person who has 20,000 PVCs, 30,000 PVCs in a 24-hour period, which I've had, your trauma is minute by minute, second by second. It's compounded constantly. And like right now, for instance, as everybody knows who reads this comments or watches the videos, I've had pretty good luck with the diet and the supplementation. It's made a huge difference. I feel I have them under control. I still have bouts, but each bout compounds that trauma. So it's not over. Now, as a mental health professional, I use all my books, I use all my training, I use almost things to work with myself to try to get over this stuff. And you're talking, it's 2020 and I've been dealing with stuff since 93. It's not just going to go away. It takes time. It's gotten better. It has, and I work with it, but I have an advantage. I have a degree. I have 3 degrees in psychology. So what about the person that doesn't? What about you folks that don't even have a counselor or a therapist that understands this problem? They don't necessarily have to understand what they have to understand trauma. They have to understand the impact it has on your life. Because it does take a little bit more out of us each time, right? But the thing that really strikes me is how many of us, the big question to all of you, how many of you have changed your lifestyles to accommodate the fear, the anxiety, the worry of PVCs, SVT impacts? Now, let's say you had an ambition in life. An athletic, we've actually had people on the message board that are athletes that stop because they got PVCs. That immobilizes you. A year I spent on a couch because I was immobilized. Completely immobilized. Not collapsed, but immobilized. I wouldn't want to move because of fear of the PVCs were going to kick off. I was having so many, nothing worked. The meds didn't work. So I was immobilized. How much of my life did I lose? Now, I could say a year, but what about the trauma that followed that? Because as one poster said, you have the event and then you have to mentally get over that. We never really get over that. That trauma just keeps stacking. It's like the pages in a book are trauma. Each page is a trauma that sits on top of another, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. So it takes away from us. It immobilizes us to a degree. It changes our lives to the point that we change how we want to do things in our life. All right? So my questions are for you. Are we the same after each time? Do we change? Who are we now? Before the first PVCs or the struggle with PVCs, that person versus the person we are now. Are we different because of them? Did our paths change? Am I more irritable? Would I have been less irritable? Would I have had time to do other things if I wasn't worried about this? Are we our best selves? Is this the best we can be? Are we crippled by these things to the point that we've given up things in our lives that we wanted to be here in our lives, but we're here because of these things? Because we've been shackled by this, though? I submit this is compound trauma. It's continual compound trauma. It hasn't stopped. We're rubber banded constantly by these moments to the fear of death. That's where we're at. And it's important for all of us to build this community and create a singular voice because we have new people getting them. When you read somebody, I just started having PVCs at whatever age, do I have to look forward to this to the rest of my life? I can't answer that. I have. Not everybody does. Some people are lucky enough to get ablations. I wasn't lucky enough. I've had to do this my way. Diet, supplementation. And I used to be against supplements completely. I've read enough studies to find out they say they don't know if they work or not. But for me, they do. And for some people, they do. Recent post and a recent comment, a bloke said that he started supplementing with a protein shake that has vitamin D and B1 in it. That's another thing, too. The more we talk about this, the more we're going to help ourselves. We have to help ourselves because right now our support structure in the world is pretty slim. There are doctors that do care. But you got to walk a mile in our moccasins, folks. It's just that simple. You can't say you understand unless you have them. You can have empathy. I really believe that there are a lot of people out there that care. But some doctors just don't get it. They don't get it. So this is repeated trauma. It's compound trauma. I'm going to change it. It's compounding trauma because it hasn't stopped. So, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm kind of long-winded today, but I hope that helps. And let me know what you guys want to hear about. I'm going to continue to make videos because I still have stuff that comes up. I still have ideas. I think about this stuff from the point of view as a sufferer and a mental health professional. So I'm going to keep bringing you the content, but give me some ideas. What would you like to hear about? I'm still working on the live session, but I'm trying to figure out the technology behind that. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody stopping by and answer my questions in the comments. I hope you make it to the end of the video.